Well, what a week it's been. Star Wars Battlefront II on the front pages of so many video game news sites. I had a busy week, but I was eagerly following all of the news when I got home. And it was personally gratifying because this is an issue that I predicted years ago and have been following pretty consistently on the channel, albeit very few people have seen or heard my contributions on the issue of loot boxes and free-to-play gaming. But they've been there all the way back. I think 3 or 4 years ago, I did a video on free-to-play, the sort of philosophy of free-to-play video game design with regard to Hearthstone. I did a segment on the podcast that talked about functional inequalities like extreme difficulty in arcade games and home ports of arcade games, which was used to, in the first instance, increase coin-in, in the second instance, extend playtime once you purchased one of those ports, and compared it to structural inequality, designing a game from the ground up to have digital economies and artificial scarcity and using the competitive spirit of players in an online match to ultimately sell them various items, all the way up to my video about video games as weapons of math destruction, where I talked about, in connection with a recent book that had that title, are video games just sophisticated online algorithms that manipulate player behavior? And of course, I did do a video on loot boxes a couple weeks ago that, again, kind of predicted what was going on with Star Wars Battlefront II. But I'm not here to brag. I think it's sad on the one hand. I think a lot of people were looking forward to this game, and they've come to a realization. Obviously, there was hate, and of course the stupid death threats that always happen. But I think embedded in all of that was a realization that games are changing, and I think 2017 is an inflection point. It's kind of like a fork in the road for the industry. We start the year with some absolutely amazing games, and of course Breath of the Wild stands above all of them. An amazing single-player game. You paid your $60 and you had this incredible world to explore. And now we're ending the year, now that the run-up to Christmas is underway, we're ending the year with a very deliberate and very intense push to turn the $60 title into, a free-to-play, freemium digital economy. And so the $60 at year's end is not used to purchase a product. It's simply a cover charge to get you into this gaming world, or as I would call it, a gaming economy wherein everything is rigged to get you to pay at least $60 or far, far more. Now, obviously, here at the end of the week, Star Wars, or the developers, I think it's DICE and EA, the parties behind Star Wars Battlefront II have turned off purchases. They've kind of given in to the pressure, and so now the only way that you can progress in the game is through playing and succeeding at the game. So a lot of people see this as a victory, and it is certainly a victory. I mean, it is, I think, a rare instance where this intense community pressure changed a policy, but of course it's only temporary. They said that those systems will be reviewed and will eventually come back online. So I would, if they took a big enough sales hit, I could see Black Friday, flash deal on Amazon, $30 for this game, or maybe Christmas week when all the kids have their Christmas money, it's $20, and then come January, February, those systems will reactivate and we'll be back at square one. And as heated as the debates were, as intense as the pushback was, I kind of suspect that the publishers who are fiercely pushing these kind of mechanics are working from a data set and some economic assumptions that suggest it's okay to piss off a certain amount of players. I think they believe that whatever bad press they're going to get because of this, the financial reward that they have seen, and they're experimenting with loot boxes and similar mechanics, is so great that they're okay with the bad press. And I think they could probably alienate 20 to 30% of their traditional consumer base and still be even more profitable than they were 5 years ago with these mechanics. I have no source on that. I have no data myself. But human nature being what it is, gambling is addictive. And perhaps for one of the first times in kind of a mainstream cultural product, you can now build in systems that encourage compulsive behavior, if not legally identical, very similar to gambling. And that is probably very profitable. You know, they talk about turning payers into players, and they brag. There were a couple of these articles. It was the Rolling Stone had a really great article on this about how, you know, the whales can sustain a good bit of the development of these games. So maybe they just need 5% of their player base to be whales, and the rest to just be payers willing to constantly pump in money to stay competitive online, to have the latest loadouts or whatever it is that you're actually getting through these mechanics, and that's enough. I think in a certain sense, this is an acknowledgement to the broader player base, or at least to the segment of us who are attached to the traditional model, that times have changed. And video games are now going to be a sophisticated, competitive online environment with microeconomies that we need to engage if we want to succeed. You know, multiplayer is no longer going to be a feature or an option. It will be the reality. There may be an offline mode where you can train or fight bots or something like that, but the core of the game, any game, will be a competitive multiplayer, e-sport type of game. And if you aren't willing or don't have the time to invest hours and hours and hours into the game, then you're going to have to pay up. And maybe the games will drop in price to accommodate this new model, but probably not. I think in a certain sense, these publishers, they want the allure of the AAA $60 game, but they also want to smuggle in these mechanics so that you're paying even more over time. And so personally, you know, for me, this is a line in the sand. I think it is utterly irrational to play games when I am firmly convinced that the intentions of the developers and of the publishers aren't to make a great game, to make a fun game, but to create a digital economy in which I'm being constantly manipulated. If I can't trust that I have a fair playing field, if it's a multiplayer game, or if I don't believe that the developers made this game to give me X amount of hours of enjoyment, then I can't really, at least for me in good conscience, buy the game or pay in to these various systems. But again, I think that for the publishers, that's okay. I think they are more than happy to jettison those of us who are in the old school and those of us who still have the mentality of $60, X amount of fun, and that's that. Microtransactions are the future, I think. Just like, you know, DLC, we were all angry about DLC back in the day, and now that's the new normal. I think loot crates and gambling mechanics and, intense monetization will be the new normal, if not right now, then certainly in the 2020s. And so it's just up to all of us to respond. Do we constantly pressure them? Will it matter? Do we just detach from the hobby? It'll be interesting to see how it plays out. But I think we very much have to consider that the future of video games is a future in which the game itself is nothing more than a digital manipulation.